Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Big Apple Blitz here on a Monday morning. What is going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how's it going, my friend?
It's going. It's a tough time to be a Giants fan right now. We kind of understood that would be the case, especially if they didn't get off to a hot start this season. And I don't know if they could have gotten off to a colder start this season. It's been ugly. I have some choice words for head coach Brian Daboll. I think his seat is starting to get a little bit warm. And I think that as we stare down a potential 0-3 start versus the Cleveland Browns next week, there is a very clear path to an absolute dumpster fire being set in MetLife Stadium within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Figure we start with the Giants here. We'll get into the Jets in the second half of the show today, but just a weird game all around in this Giants Commanders matchup. So Giants don't allow a touchdown in this game, but still find a way to lose. They score 3 touchdowns of their own. They lose 21-18. And one of the biggest reasons for the loss is they didn't dress a kicker. Like, can you just walk me through all of this? Again, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm piling on. Like, I'm really not trying to. I'm trying to give like the context of just how bizarre this game was. But what do you take away from that?
I mean, this is not the first time that Brian Daboll's game day incompetence has cost his team games. And I will dive into that in a second, but I want to clarify because yesterday in the Fireside Giants reaction video that we did to the game, I said that the defense didn't lose them this game. I said it was good enough to win. And I caught a lot of criticism, but I honestly stand by it. The Giants defense only surrendered 21 points and 0 touchdowns. Yes, they allowed over 400 yards of offense from the Commanders. Yeah, the Commanders ran for over 200 yards. They ran all over this Giants defense. I get it. The defense wasn't good, but it wasn't the reason that the Giants lost was really the point that I was trying to make. And honestly, I stand by it, like I said, because I think when you keep it seven red zone trips and you keep a team out of the end zone every single one of those trips, the defense deserves some sort of credit for that. There were some standout performers. It wasn't a great performance, but it was good enough. And when we give Daniel Jones credit for being good enough to win week in and week out when the Giants do, then we also need to give the defense credit for being good enough in those right moments. So I'm standing by it. The Giants defense for the most part was terrible, but when it really counted, they were fine. And so I think they played a good enough game to win. However, they could not win this game because the team could not kick a field goal. Brian Daboll had the opportunity on Saturday when Graham Gano popped up on the injury report to make 2 key adjustments. One, he could have elevated a kicker off of the practice squad. The Giants do have a backup kicker. His name is Jude McTominay. They brought him in because Gano missed time with an injury last season. So they wanted to hedge their bets there with a veteran kicker in Graham Gano who's had some injury problems. Get yourself a backup kicker. Very smart move. So they have a backup kicker. He pops up on the injury report on Saturday with a groin issue. So, like I said, adjustment number 1 could have been to elevate the backup. Adjustment number 2, don't let Graham Gano do the kickoffs. Just let the punter, Jamie Gillen, let him kick the ball off. Let Graham Gano only kick for place kicks. The Giants did neither of those things. They did not elevate a kicker, and they had Graham Gano kicking on kickoffs. So what happens on the first play of the game? Well, exactly what we all saw coming. Graham Gano running with one half of a groin left on his body up the sideline trying to chase down a return specialist, pulls his hamstring. So he didn't pull his groin, and Brian Daboll's trying to use that as an excuse here. Couldn't have seen a hamstring pull coming. He shouldn't have been on the kickoffs in the first place. He was injured. So this is like malpractice at the highest level for a head coach, in my opinion. They don't give him full blame because it's a collaborative effort between Daboll and Joe Schoen, the front office. They ultimately all decide who gets elevated for game days. But let's be so for real. Dable had every opportunity to correct this mistake, chose not to. It flew back in his face, and the Giants lost this game because of their head coach's incompetence.
And as you mentioned, like the red lights flashing here is this isn't the first time that it's happened. It's inexcusable to happen once, but for it to happen 2 times within the last 2 years, like how is that happening at the NFL level? I really don't get it. And obviously, I don't want to skip over the complete game. Like we'll work our way through it, but just while we're on Brian Dable, I thought his press conference was just so bizarre. Like he couldn't fathom someone asking about his job security after an absolute shit show of a performance like that. And then to stare down the reporter like through the remainder of the press conference and after like while he was walking off the stage is just such weird behavior there. This guy, honestly, it feels like it's over. This I don't know how you come back from that.
It's tough. I mean, listen, Jets fans saw it firsthand last year when Graham Gano missed those field goals against the Jets because he was injured. So again, like you think that the Giants would learn their lessons here, and I thought Dan Duggan of The Athletic put it best, and he put it in a pretty funny way. He pretty much summarizing what he said here. He said, "Fantasy football owners or team managers can set their lineups every week. Why can't the Giants?" It's completely true. How do the Giants not have a backup plan here, a worst case scenario plan here for Graham Gano? And that was something that really irked me yesterday in that press conference that you're mentioning with Dable. He said he had a groin injury. We never could have seen a hamstring injury coming. And it's like, okay, so you don't expect the hamstring injury, but you also couldn't expect that it would happen or wouldn't happen either way. You didn't plan for it. You didn't plan for him to get injured. You didn't plan for him to stay healthy. You just put him out there with no plan. There had to have been some sort of contingency, and there wasn't. And again, this has happened several times here. The defense did enough. The Giants had opportunities to score points and win the game. And you know what? Screw it. Why not just let the punter kick a field goal? He kicked one last year. He made one from 40 yards last year. Let him do it again. I mean, I get that he missed that first point after try in the first quarter when the Giants scored that touchdown. Jamie Gillen misses the extra point. Okay, that was only his first kick. I saw a video of Jamie Gillen on the sideline. He was pissed off. He wanted an opportunity to kick a field goal, and I think the Giants should have given him one. Going for 2 every single time, going for it on 4th down. It came back to bite the Giants. It was a mismanaged game plan, and this is where Giants fans say, well, at least we have a good head coach. Once we get him a quarterback, we can start to win games. I don't think that's true. He has not proven that. Dable had the 2022 season, a lot of success that season. Since then, a lot of mismanaged games and a lot of losses that you can primarily blame him for. That's not exactly a coach that I want to hand a rookie quarterback to in 2025, despite what he did years ago with Josh Allen. So I have so many questions about the direction of this team. I do not feel optimistic at all about the future of this team. And yesterday's performance was so embarrassing that I really feel like jobs are so close to being lost in New York, New Jersey.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I do think it's only a matter of time, and like if things start to really go off the rails here, because we brought it up on I think it was the last episode, the schedule. Looking at this Giant schedule, if the win didn't come this week, when is it going to come? And if they're sitting at like 0-8, like what's the point? Like you're prolonging the inevitable at that point. So I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm sure you did, but I'm going to pull it up anyway to share. I don't know if you saw this stat with teams outscoring their opponents by 3+ touchdowns and what their record is. Yeah. So team record when scoring 3+ touchdowns and allowing 0 touchdowns before today, 1,019 wins, 1 loss. After today, 1,019-2. Only the New York Giants. It's unfathomable, truly, what happened yesterday.
I mean, I can't believe that they lost in such a fashion. Like I said, the defense didn't allow any touchdowns. They did their job for the most part. I get it. They got ran all over. It was bend, don't break, though. The whole idea was once you get them into the red zone, just don't let them into the end zone. They did their job in that respect. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns. They just didn't have any extra points or field goals to complement it, and they had a turnover. So when you lose the turnover battle and you don't connect on special teams at all, you're going to lose the game. It's a 3-facet game, and I thought that the defense not perfect, has a lot to work on, good enough. And I thought Daniel Jones, I'll give him credit, he was also good enough. He didn't light up the stat sheet. He missed a few throws for sure. He wasn't perfect, but he was good enough to win that game, and he does deserve credit. Again, I thought that almost everybody on this team was good enough. You just had a massive miscalculation on the part of the head coach. And it feels so disrespectful to the players who fought so hard for 60 minutes, like down to the wire. The game was decided as the clock hit 0 on that field goal. You go through 60 minutes of a game and your players deserve that win. The head coach needs to deliver that win to them. And for the head coach to be the reason that that win wasn't earned is really disheartening. And I mean, frustration is going to spill out, like if they don't turn it around ASAP, this is where, when losses like this happen, this is where the locker room gets lost. This is where players start to turn on the head coach. And that's when ownership has to step in and make a change in the coaching staff. So I'm very scared about where the season is heading. Like, we knew that it could be bad, but we kind of knew that it would be bad in the sense where Daniel Jones wasn't going to play well and Dable was probably going to carry them to some wins. Actually, we're seeing the opposite now. So that pretty much tells you just how scary things are for the Giants.
Now, making the comparison on like the Jets side of things for a second, now, believe me, Dable, I think, is a better coach than this guy that I'm about to say, and he had a significantly better first season. But this kind of reminds me of the Adam Gase era Jets, where they are just like, the coach is just completely lost. They are killing themselves in losing games in ways like you just didn't think possible. And you're just looking at the schedule wondering, when is that win going to come? And it's a really tough spot. 2020 was a horrible year watching football for Jet fans. 2-14, didn't even land the number 1 pick, got the number 2 pick, settled for Zach Wilson, the whole thing. Awful, disgraceful year. It feels like that's where this Giants season is going. I know it's only 2 weeks in. Maybe they turn things around. Cleveland, I don't think is, this great football team, but I don't know. The more I see the Giants, the more I think this is just going to end really poorly.
I agree with you. At least there were some positive takeaways from this game, though. I don't want to be all doom and gloom because, listen, we knew that this was going to be a bad Giants team. So focus on the positives where we can find them. Drew Phillips, rookie cornerback in the 3rd round, he looks like he's going to be a star. I mean, he was so good in week 1, even better yesterday afternoon. He had 12 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, couple pass breakups. Like, the guy was everywhere, all over the field. He's been stellar through 2 weeks, and so has Malik Nabers. I mean, the Giants had Nabers calling plays for a lot of this game. I don't know if you read that on social media, but yeah, Dable was pretty much just asking Nabers on the sideline, what plays do you want called? And he was calling them. So Nabers was not only the entire offense in terms of on the field production, but he was straight up running the offense from the sideline. That is incredible for a 21-year-old wide receiver to have that level of impact. And on top of that, I know he dropped the pass at the end of the game. This is my take on it. That is the best thing to ever happen to Malik Nabers, because he will never make that mistake again. If you saw the way that absolutely killed him inside, the way that he was so frustrated and beating himself up and so upset, he's never going to let that happen again. So now I feel even more comfortable. 4th down, game on the line, ball is going to Nabers. He's going to make the play every single time. Now he's going to be more motivated than ever. He's 21. And my favorite aspect of that whole fallout from that drop that he had, if you watch how he spoke to the media following the game, you wouldn't know he was 21 years old. The level of maturity that he demonstrated and his ability to take accountability, I was so impressed with him. So impressed with him on the field, so impressed with him off the field. The Giants really got themselves a star, and we're always going to make these comparisons to Odell. He's the last superstar receiver that the Giants had. He was from LSU. He was eccentric. He had his moments of blow up temper tantrums on the sideline, all of those things with Odell. The key difference here for Malik Nabers and Odell Beckham Jr. is the way that Nabers has handled the media so far. Because when he's had some blowups on the sideline or he's had some adversity and he's been upset, the way that he's responded has been very different to the ways that OBJ used to respond. And Odell is one of my favorite players of all time. I love the guy, but he absolutely mismanaged the way that he spoke to the media when he was in New York. And his personality style just wasn't necessarily a match for the New York media. Nabers, complete opposite. He is perfect for this New York media. He says everything that Giants fans and Giants reporters love to hear. So going forward, I feel so comfortable with him. That drop was the best thing that ever happened to him. I've never been more confident in a Giants rookie than I am right now.
I really like that take a lot. I think that's a good way to look at it and a positive way to look at it. And, guys like, like Malik Neighbors is going to be someone that you're going to obviously want to take a look at and watch. And these young players, at Nickelback, Drew Phillips, 3rd round pick, who's coming in and performing really well at a high level through 2 games. That's awesome. You absolutely love to see it. I wanted to pull up the box score and just take a look at the receiving numbers. 10 catches for 127 yards and a touchdown, had 18 targets in the game. Like, clearly the Giants were putting an emphasis on getting Malik Neighbors the ball, which I love. But even Devin Singletary had himself a nice game too. 16 carries, 95 yards, got in the end zone. Offensively, they were better. They were definitely better than what they were a week ago, but unfortunately still not enough. But on the positive side, at least, I thought Malik Neighbors looked really good, and Singletary too. Those are 2 guys who stood out to me.
Yeah, I thought Singletary looked good. He just had one bad mistake, and that's kind of the summary of this game for the New York Giants. Neighbors had one bad mistake, dropping that 4th down pass. Singletary had his fumble. That was his one bad mistake, and it ended up costing the Giants big time. And obviously, Brian Daboll had his one bad mistake, not making a change at the kicker position. But that's kind of the name of the game here in the NFL, isn't it? The margin for error is so small. Like, you can't make one bad mistake. It will cost your team. It will cost your season at times. So this Giants team needs to just stop making these small mistakes and beating themselves, because that's what's happening here. So yeah, on the offensive side of the ball, I was super impressed with Singletary, Neighbors. Wandale looked good. He needs to get the ball more, honestly, but you can't really criticize this game plan too much. I mean, the 18 targets for Malik Neighbors, and there were a few plays that were left out there. He probably could have ended up with at least 20 targets if we're being completely honest about it. So, and like I said, Daniel Jones, huge step in the right direction. No, it doesn't change anything for me. I still think he should be benched by week 8. He still has the injury clause in his contract, and he has not thrown a 2-touchdown game in back-to-back games in 40 starts. That's a great stat that I saw from mutual of mine, Authentic, on social media yesterday. That is the definition of inconsistency. So unless he goes out there and balls out next week, nothing's changed for me. I got to see it across several weeks. And yeah, like you said, the offense, big step in the right direction. They played well enough to win this game. It just didn't happen for him.
And tough defense coming up. We'll preview more on Thursday, but tough defense coming up against Cleveland too. That's, I think it's asking a lot if you're expecting another kind of offensive performance that you saw, at least from the Daniel Jones side of things. I'd be surprised if he had another 2-touchdown game this week.
I would be too. And one other thing that I want to note from this Washington game, the offensive line looked stellar. He was standing in a lot of clean pockets. We said the same thing last week. The offensive line is finally good right now. And I'm not going to say that it's going to stay that way the whole season. I have really bad PTSD when it comes to New York Giants offensive line, so I don't want to get too excited. But through 2 weeks, it looks great. Going into week 3 versus Cleveland, though, and Myles Garrett and all the guys they have up front, that's a real test for them. And not only that, their secondary is sick. They have great cornerbacks. That's going to be a real test for Neighbors, for Daniel Jones. I say it's going to be a real test, but really what it is kind of a matchup nightmare for an 0-2 Giants football team with a lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll see how that one goes. Obviously, like you said, we'll preview it more on Thursday. But if the offensive line continues to hold up week in, week out, Neighbors keeps making plays, the Giants should be able to get some wins this season. It's just going to rest on the shoulders of now not only Daniel Jones, but also on head coach Brian Daboll.
Let's get into some of these comments here. Plumber Mo, love the profile picture there from our guy. The lack of ability to stop the run is not substantial in the long run. What was your take on the Giants run defense from this past game? They gave up, I want to pull up the numbers, 215 yards on the ground.
I mean, their run defense was terrible. It was atrocious. And it's really disappointing because Shane Bowen was hired because of his run defense abilities. Like, Brian Daboll straight up said that. We really liked Bowen's ability to coach against the run. That's why we hired him. So far through 2 weeks, all teams have done is run against the New York Giants and run for a ton of yardage. So it's obviously concerning, but I agree with Plumber Mo here. The lack of ability to stop the run is not substantial in the long run. Honestly, it wasn't even substantial in week 2. They still could have won that game despite getting ran all over because of their red zone defense. So I'm in agreement. I think it's obviously a problem that needs to be solved, and Shane Bowen has to be better, and the Giants defense needs to be better, and they need to turn it around as soon as possible. But they did not lose the game for this team yesterday. The run defense did not actually kill them. They didn't surrender any rushing touchdowns. So I do agree. It'll get fixed eventually. It's not sustainable. This isn't going to happen every single week. 200 yards on the ground isn't going to happen every single week. Got to be better, but also it didn't kill them. It's not the reason they lost.
How about Wild Wave says, let's be honest, the reason why the Giants are in the position they are in is because of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. It sounds harsh, but wanted to hear your reaction to that comment.
I don't disagree at all. This roster is completely Joe Schoen's, and he made some of these decisions over the past few years. There's only a handful of Dave Gettleman guys left. You're talking Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, Darius Slayton, Daniel Jones, and that might be it. He let Saquon Barkley go. He cut ties with all of those mid and late round draft picks. They're all gone. The Gettleman era is over. This is now Joe Schoen's roster, and Joe Schoen's roster sucks. So yes, he is part of the problem. The reason that the Giants are in this position, it was Joe Schoen who decided to extend Daniel Jones. It wasn't Dave Gettleman. He could have franchise tagged him. He didn't. The Giants cap space, much better place than it was under Gettleman, but still not perfect because of that Daniel Jones contract. So I'm in complete agreement with this, and also with Daboll. I think the Giants felt really confident after he won head coach of the year. They bought into a little bit of a fluky season, and they doubled down on some mistakes that they made, honestly, is what it was. And it is coming back to bite them in the ass.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that one. Rocco says kicking game is so underrated in this league. There is always a few games that goes right to the end. Washington kicker kicked 7 field goals, their only scores. That was obviously the difference. Don't forget the Giants run defense. We just hit on the run defense. Special teams matters. When we get into the Jets game, we can talk about some special teams, but it really does matter in the NFL.
It's so important. I mean, my God, do I wish I had a Kaimi Fairbairn on my team. That guy is just automatic from anywhere on the field. But, that's not the reality. Not every team can have a Kaimi Fairbairn. Sometimes you have a Graham Gano who might get injured, but you have to be prepared for that. And the Giants really just weren't prepared. And their special teams has been a problem for a few years now. They made a change at the special teams coordinator position this offseason. I don't know if we've really seen any improvements in that regard, but listen, kicking is so important. It's so crucial. We see teams win and lose because of their kickers all the time. It's hard to say that the Giants lost because of their kicker in this one. I can't really blame Graham Gano. It wasn't his fault that he got hurt. I think that it's just the fault of the head coach not making the necessary adjustments for his kicker and for his special teams. But you're right. Special teams, just as important as the other two facets of the game. The Giants need to be better in that regard.
I'm with you on that one. Anything else on this Giants week 2 matchup before we transition and get into how the Jets fared in their game?
Listen, for any Giants fans who are feeling really doom and gloom, just remind yourself, we knew that this wasn't going to be a playoff season. Like, we knew this team wasn't going to be competing for a wild card spot, really. That would be like the absolute dream scenario that we didn't foresee. But what you can take away positively is that the bright moments for this team have come from the rookies. This might be Joe Schoen's best draft class so far, and it's coming at the perfect time because this is a team that's set up to have one more year of a quarterback that they don't want, hopefully reboot at the position in the offseason, and have a strong nucleus of young talent around him with Drew Phillips, with Malik Neighbors, and some of these other young players. Tyler Nubin looked solid as well. So I think that we could feel confident in the future, at least in some way, because of the talent on the roster. The Giants just have some other bigger questions, but that's what the next 15 weeks are going to be for, finding those answers.
There we go. So let's get over to the New York Jets, who found their first win of the season against the Tennessee Titans, a 24-17 game. They made you sweat. It wasn't pretty, but a win is a win, and I felt myself breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. They could not afford to start 0-2. Said this was a must-win game. They end up taking care of business here. But one of the big things that stood out to me in this game and where I wanted to start, running back to a Breece Hall and Braylon Allen is really freaking good. And we spent a lot of time saying that it was, ridiculous that Braylon Allen didn't get on the field into the final drive. of the game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. And now he goes out, has 7 carries for 33 yards and a touchdown, and also had a receiving touchdown as well. 20 years old, 2 touchdowns performance in his second career game. I think that is my biggest takeaway, at least offensively, and then we get into some of the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he looked awesome. He's a big bruising running back. He's a player that we really liked when the Jets drafted him. We thought that was a solid pickup, and so far, so good. I mean, he was really impressive yesterday, not only on the ground, but also as a receiver. And this running back duo has the potential to be super, super talented and special throughout the season. I mean, Breece Hall probably hasn't caught fire the way that we want him to just yet, but he will. Like, it'll happen. And he did have a wow moment yesterday. I mean, that touchdown grab, Matt, like that was unbelievable. He turned into like prime Randy Moss for a play. Just went up there, grabbed that thing in the end zone. A running back making that play, that blew my mind. That was awesome.
Yeah, the funny thing, well, really not so funny, and something that frustrated me a lot in this game. The Jets were getting to the line of scrimmage really late. I don't know if it's Hackett getting the play call in late or Rodgers kind of dilly-dallying or what. Rodgers took the blame for it with the media because, of course, like that's what he's going to do. But they took a timeout right before that, and then the formation, Breece was going to be lined up wide, and he goes, if I'm one-on-one with a linebacker, throw me a go ball. And that's exactly what happened. He threw a go ball and he went up and just made an absolutely unbelievable play on it. Him being such a weapon in the receiving game, I think is going to really change some things for the New York Jets. But that duo again, Hall and Allen, like this is what I wanted to see. It was way too much in week 1. It was only exclusively Breece Hall. They didn't use Allen at all. The offensive line in the run game was really bad. But this week, very big positive in the right direction on both the ground game and then the pass game on the offensive line was good once again. Only 1 pressure and 1 sack given up for this offensive line. That to me has to be another huge takeaway offensively is just the impressive play that we've seen from the front 5.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the improved offensive line makes a night and day difference for a Jets team that had awful offensive line play last year. And I do think that some of that credit goes to Aaron Rodgers. The way that you manage a pocket, the way that you're able to get the ball out quickly enough to where the pressure doesn't factor in, and, making different calls at the line of scrimmage to slide protections and stuff. So you're super impressed with everything that the Jets offensive lineman did in this game. But I also think that you can feel the impact of Aaron Rodgers. Now, he's not lighting up the stat sheet. He didn't throw for 200 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns. He wasn't perfect by any means, but it's those hidden differences that you can't necessarily see in the stat sheet that he's making that are helping this Jets team win. And I think that's something that, like I said, even if Rodgers is a middle of the league quarterback this year, he elevated the floor so much for this Jets team that you could feel really confident and comfortable in this team as we get deeper into the season, especially now seeing the way that he's impacted not only the playmakers in the offense in that regard, but also the offensive line.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I wanted to pull up the numbers. You mentioned it, 18 of 30, 176 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I don't think it was a stellar Aaron Rodgers performance. And I don't think he's looked amazing through the first 2 games. But as you brought up, some adjustments that he's been able to make. One, just that we talked about the Breece Hall touchdown already. Like that's a play that a veteran quarterback makes. On the Braylon Allen rushing touchdown, he checked to that play. And I believe it was Emmanuel Ocho on Twitter was pointing out how like that was like the biggest moment of the game and is going to get really underutilized or not looked at enough. And then also earlier on that final touchdown drive to give the Jets the lead at 24-17, you had the third down throw to Garrett Wilson where he was able to, kind of just loft it up there and Garrett ran underneath it to catch it over the opposite shoulder. And then on 2nd and 16, he was like, I'm just throwing this up to Mike Williams because I know he's going to go up and get the football. And he did. Mike Williams only had that 1 catch, but it was 19 yards to pick up a 2nd and 16. So while to me, it looks like the Jets offense and Aaron Rodgers really hasn't hit its like fullest form yet. There's some signs of life, in my opinion, and some things that you could be pretty excited about.
I mean, absolutely. I think that there's so much to be excited about. That stat line that you pulled up there for Aaron Rodgers, that is a vintage Daniel Jones elite performance, according to Giants fans. Now I'm kind of just being bitter here, but no, it's a good game from Rodgers. You know that it's only week 2. He didn't play in the preseason. I think that he's still kind of warming up and getting going here, but it's those hidden differences. Like you said, that touchdown to Breece Hall is going to be overlooked. People aren't going to understand the impact of what Aaron Rodgers did on that play. It was a spectacular grab from Breece Hall, and he deserves all the credit. But credit also has to be given to Rodgers. And those kinds of plays, they happen throughout the course of the game. You can't necessarily see it, but it's that hidden stuff of the impact of a veteran quarterback with all of that savvy that keeps that offense going. And I'll even give credit as well to Nathaniel Hackett. I thought he did a much better job in this game than he did in week 1. I thought the playmakers were found in better positions to succeed. And he's given Rodgers a lot of autonomy to make some of those changes and run some of those plays on his own. So I think even Hackett deserves a little bit of credit here for being maybe an unsung hero in week 2 for the Jets.
Okay. That's a little bit of a bold take, but I like it. And I have another stat similar to the Giants one that we brought up earlier. This is a break your brain stat. So we just mentioned with Aaron Rodgers, this is really his first 2 games as a Jet. Week 1 last year, he only lasted 4 plays. So it's like, this is really the first time we're seeing him as a Jets quarterback. 2 starts. Offensively, now he didn't have the final touchdown drive against San Francisco a week ago, but this is back-to-back games. The Jets have had 3 offensive touchdowns. The Jets, the last time they had back-to-back games with 3 or more offensive touchdowns, do you want to venture a guess when that was?
Are we talking like Darnold era? We
are talking Chad Pennington 2002.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, exactly. This never, ever happens. And again, I don't think Rodgers has really even hit his stride yet. And they're operating as like, I believe it's the 10th or 11th offense in EPA right now. So I think the potential's there for this to be a top 10 offense. But like, again, Rodgers hasn't even looked like himself yet, but this is something that Jet fans just have not seen essentially ever.
That's yeah, you said mind-boggling stat or whatever. Yeah, I am absolutely floored by that one. That's insane.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. But Wild Wave tossed this in the chat, and we got to talk about it and then get into this defense. Prayers up for JJ. It looks like Jermaine Johnson tore his Achilles in this game, which is just so heartbreaking. He's a really good young player entering his 3rd year in the league, had a really nice breakout season a year ago. And as soon as the cart came out and he had the towel on his head going off, like you just knew it was going to be bad. And this is a big loss for the Jets defense because they went from, at one point in this offseason, the Jets had Hassan Reddick, John Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson. And did I mention JFM? Did I say JFM? I forget what the order was. No, Will McDonald. But anyway, now there's only one guy left. It's only Will McDonald is here. Jermaine Johnson's hurt. He's done for the year. Hassan Reddick is doing God knows what. And John Franklin Myers is in Denver. So suddenly the Jets edge room isn't looking so hot. And I mean, if there was pressure already for the Jets to go out and, bring Hassan Reddick in, like that's got to be cranked up even more now after week 2.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, some sort of resolution needs to be made here. They have to figure out a way to get Hassan Reddick on the field now with Jermaine Johnson done for the year. I will say credit to Will McDonald, a 3-sack performance. Yeah. Maybe the breakout is here. Maybe it's finally happening. You get really excited about that. But, I mean, losing Jermaine Johnson stinks. Like, that is a huge loss to this Jets team. I'll even throw out there, it's a huge loss for my Dynasty NFL Sim 20-man fantasy league. Jermaine Johnson won me some games last year, so I'm a huge fan of his. Obviously as a Giants fan, I keep a close eye on the Jets, but I'm not really a huge fan of any of those players because of what Jermaine Johnson did for me in fantasy last year. This is heartbreaking. I love the guy. I thought that he was awesome. And so this is just a huge blow to this Jets defense. And now it just makes the Hassan Reddick situation that much more intense and one that needs to be resolved like yesterday.
Yeah, great call out on Will McDonald. He stepped up in a huge spot, was really quiet in week 1. Had a ton of noise from the fan base, came out 3 sacks in the absence of Jermaine Johnson. I thought played really, really well. And that's, I'm excited about it. But you said it, and it's a short week. The Jets play on Thursday. So on Thursday's episode, we'll be previewing a game day for the Jets and the Patriots. But suddenly that room looks really weak, and that's not the only injury the Jets are dealing with on the defensive side of the ball. DJ Reed didn't play in this game. Brandon Eccles did. He did a good job. He had an interception in the game. Michael Carter is still dealing with an ankle injury. Saleh, he played in this game, and Saleh thinks he can play on Thursday, but the language on that one is essentially Michael Carter is going to be dealing with an ankle all season, and it's going to be like week to week every week, which is just scary for a slot corner. And then CJ Mosley left this game with an injury and is dealing with a toe. The defense, I thought, actually looked a little bit faster with Mosley out and a little bit better, but I think it was because Mosley was playing hurt. Like, that's also a factor too. So Jets a little beat up on the defensive side of the ball now.
Yeah, definitely some cause for concern there. I mean, the defense wasn't necessarily an inspiring unit in week 1. Obviously some progress in week 2, but like you said, now with some injuries, with Hassan Reddick still holding out, probably not getting a resolution on that by Thursday. That's a quick turnaround, and I don't even know if you'd want to play him on Thursday, even if he were to return to practice like today. But a lot of question marks for this Jets defense, and I wonder how many of those question marks for you, Matt, kind of get directed towards Robert Saleh, because some of them are injury related. Some of them, are out of his control, but some of them are in his control, I would say. And I don't think that he's necessarily delivered on a lot of his promises to build a really impressive defense so far through 2 weeks. And I don't know if you attribute that to a lack of playing time in preseason, still getting warmed up here and gelling, or however you attribute it. But I am curious to hear your thoughts on Saleh through the first 2 weeks of this campaign.
Yeah, I think he's left a lot to be desired. Honestly, there was some frustrating moments in this game. Like I mentioned, they had to take timeouts because they weren't able to get to line of scrimmage, delay a game. They were penalized heavy in the first half of this game, which has been a problem under Saleh specifically the last 2 years. But also something of note too, Jets kind of got bailed out by Will Levis being Will Levis. He had another horrible fumble. It was a backwards pass, but it was nearly just as bad as the play that he made against Chicago, the pick six. And then he threw an interception that Brandon Eccles was able to reel in on back-to-back plays. So Jets got bailed out. Creating turnovers is a plus, obviously, but this defense doesn't look like it has the last 2 years through the first 2 weeks. They allowed less than 20 points. 17 is obviously an improvement. It's a little smoke and mirrors because, again, the Jets got a couple of turnovers that really saved them in the first half. They were very, very close to going down 10 or 14-0 in the first quarter. I will give them credit. They settled in nicely in the second half. They only gave up 7 points in the second half, and it was on a really weird play, the Calvin Ridley touchdown. I don't know if you saw it, but it looked like Chuck Clark probably should have intercepted it, and then Sauce Gardner looked confused that the play was actually caught. But anyway, moral of the story, they haven't been good enough yet for me to be like, okay, I'm like really back in here on Robert Saleh. But I think the defense needs to improve, which is on him, but also his in-game management is not good enough.
Yeah, I think it's something to continue to monitor. As I said, when we were discussing, when we did, I think, the schedule reveal reaction for the Jets, I said, this should be a 12-win team. Like, look at it on paper. This is an excellent roster. It's just going to come down to health and coaching. Are they making the right decisions on the sideline to put this very talented roster in position to win these games? And so far, I think in week 1, a lot of mistakes from the player personnel and the coaching staff. And then in week 2, I think that there were some mistakes that you clean those up, and this game isn't nearly as close as it was. And so my question marks still kind of remain. I don't think I've gotten any answers yet that I need for Robert Saleh. And like I said, step in the right direction for Hackett, in my opinion, in week 2. But I got to see it across several weeks, and I need to see this team start to take some major strides before we start having larger conversations about the coaching staff. And I don't want to blow that out of proportion because it's not even like we're anywhere close to where we are with the Giants coaching staff and those question marks. So, got to cool the tempers a little bit for the Jets. But, there are just some question marks that I think need to be ironed out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Harlan's in here commenting saying the Jets should play McGregor more, UDFA, who ends up making the roster. I can't say that I agree with that one. He has not looked good through the first 2 games. Didn't get a lot of pressure. Had a couple missed tackle opportunities for him. And like, this is with no Jermaine Johnson now, this is someone who is probably going to get more playing time along with Takk McKinley and Michael Clemens and Will McDonald. And that's what makes me really nervous, because you're in a go for it season. You're in an all in year. The defensive line has been such a strength for this team. And suddenly it looks like a weak spot. And there's something that could help fix that, but I don't know if and when that is actually coming or not.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. And again, I think that so much of this defense's future success for the rest of the season is really pinned to the Haason Reddick situation. We just need to get a resolution on that ASAP. And again, it's like impossible for it to be turned around as quickly as Thursday night. But I think as we look ahead to week 4 for the Jets, you've got a large amount of time there, like extra time to get something done with Haason Reddick, because you have this quick turnaround for a Thursday night game. And I think between that Thursday and the following Sunday, something's got to get fixed here for the Jets and Haason Reddick. And that's kind of something that gives me hope, because I think that with the Jermaine Johnson injury, it sucks so badly to see that happen. But in some ways, it's going to apply pressure to this Jets front office and to Haason Reddick, and probably force something to get done. And getting that something done could end up changing the course of the season in some respects, because like we said, that was not a luxury having Haason Reddick. It's definitely proven to be a necessity here, especially now with Johnson down. And so I think that looking ahead to the future of this team, getting Reddick back and watching all of these other pieces continue to fall into place, you could feel pretty good about this team going forward. It's just, what adjustments do they make between now and the trade deadline to really bolster this roster one more step and make that deep playoff run?
Yeah, that's exactly what Ike here is asking. He's saying, is pass rusher now more important to add than wide receiver at the trade deadline or before then? Kind of feels like yes. Also, too, like, we haven't seen a lot of Mike Williams yet. He only had the 1 catch in the first 2 weeks of the year. I think as the season goes on, he'll start to hit his stride a little bit. Wide receiver is still a need, and I would like to improve both if possible. But with the Jermaine Johnson injury, I would definitely say edge. How about you?
I mean, 100%. I think that I know we were texting about this a little bit yesterday, these mock trades of Haason Reddick being flipped for Davante Adams. First of all, the value doesn't line up at all for that trade to happen. And second of all, it doesn't fix the problems for this Jets team. Like, Davante Adams, stud, superstar for sure. But this Jets playmaking group is good enough. Like, it is more than good enough. This is not the biggest weakness on this team. And if you want to win games, especially late in the year, when you're talking about going up against the best quarterbacks in the NFL, especially because so many of them are in the AFC, you're talking playoff time, you got to apply pressure to those quarterbacks. You got to have a good edge rushing room and a really solid pass rush. The edge is definitely a bigger need than wide receiver for this Jets team. And if they're going to make any splash move, it needs to be, first of all, signing Haason Reddick to an extension, I guess. And if they're going to make any move in addition to that, it's got to be up front on the defensive side and not adding more skill position players, in my opinion.
There we go. So we will be back in action on Thursday. Again, short week for the Jets. They play Thursday night, home opener against the New England Patriots. It's going to be exciting to preview that game, give our thoughts for that one. Giants will be going up against the Cleveland Browns, so we will get you everything you need to know for that one as well. But little reaction to some Jets and Giants week 2 here on this Monday. Make sure to follow Anthony's Giants coverage on Fireside Giants and follow him on X and social media. Me, you can follow me on Matt O'Leary NY or on Talking Jets. That'll do it for us in this one. We'll catch you next time.